My name is Natalie Rowan, and I'm 42 years old. My boyfriend said our anniversary dinner was going to be a surprise. The kind of surprise, he hinted, that would change everything for us. I spent the whole afternoon convincing myself that meant something good. An engagement, a trip, some big romantic gesture to make up for all the nights he'd come home, too tired to talk, and all the weekends that somehow slipped away from us. Instead, the surprise was another woman at the table, his new girlfriend. And he introduced her like we were all adults in a very modern, very enlightened arrangement I just hadn't been informed about yet. The restaurant he picked wasn't the casual kind. It was the kind you only go to when you've ironed your shirt twice, rehearsed your smile in the mirror, and checked your bank account balance 3 times before making the reservation. Low lighting, soft jazz, white tablecloths that made the silverware glint like little knives in the candlelight. He was already seated when I walked in, wearing the navy shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. The hostess led me over, and he stood up, gave me a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek that landed more on my hair than on my skin. "You look great," he said, like it was an obligation. "Big night, Nat." Big night. I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you've been with someone for 15 years, and you've learned to smooth over the rough edges, to fill in the gaps with hope. We ordered drinks. I could feel my shoulders start to loosen, the familiar rhythm of small talk and shared jokes sliding into place. He seemed restless, fingers tapping, gaze flicking toward the entrance every few seconds. I told myself he was nervous because he was going to propose. My heart actually sped up at the thought. When the waiter left with our drink order, Michael cleared his throat. "So," he said, a little too brightly, "the surprise isn't just the restaurant." He glanced toward this entrance again. I followed his eyes. That's when she walked in. She was pretty in that carefully curated way. Soft waves in her hair, dress that said effortless, but probably took an hour to choose, confidence radiating off her like perfume. She scanned the room, saw him, and smiled like she'd just spotted her prize. Michael stood up and lifted a hand. She came over. "Natalie," he said, taking her hand in his. "This is Alyssa, my new partner." Partner. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. The room went quiet and loud at the same time, the clatter of cutlery and low conversations turning into white noise. I stared at him, then at her, trying to make the words rearrange themselves into something else. "You're what?" I asked, but it came out almost calm, too calm. He cleared his throat again. "My partner. Alyssa and we've been seeing each other for a while. I wanted us all to meet. Be honest and upfront, talk about arrangements." Alyssa gave me this tight, sympathetic smile, like she was the nurse delivering bad news, but also secretly dating the doctor who caused the problem in the first place. I just nodded once, slowly, reached for my water, took a sip so my hands would have something to do besides trembling. "Charming," I said. Alyssa's smile flickered. Michael looked thrown for half a second, like he'd expected screaming, tears, a scene. Maybe that's what he wanted. Something loud and messy, so he could tell himself later that I was unreasonable, that he'd tried to handle it maturely. Instead, I set my glass down, picked up my purse, and signaled the waiter. "Can I get the bill for my drink and my half of the appetizer?" I asked quietly, before the poor guy could even introduce himself. "Just mine, please." Michael frowned. "Nat, come on, don't be dramatic. We can talk like adults." "Oh, I'm being very adult," I said. "I'm paying for what I consumed and leaving you to enjoy your debut." I took out cash, laid it carefully on the little tray the waiter brought. My napkin went on the table, folded, neat. My heart was pounding, but there was this strange clarity running through me, like someone had opened a window in a stuffy room. "Well," I said, pushing my chair back, "you two enjoy the rest of your night. Congratulations on the big reveal." I didn't look at Alyssa again. I didn't look at Michael. I just walked out. The air outside was cold enough to sting my lungs, but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in the last hour. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching my breath fog in the glow of the restaurant's golden light, and waited for the breakdown that never came. It didn't hit me on the drive home either. The city lights blurred past, but my hands on the steering wheel were steady. My phone buzzed twice in my bag. Michael, I assumed. I didn't reach for it. The next morning, instead of lying in bed replaying the scene over and over, I was sitting in a chair across from a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Her name was Miss Herrera, and she was a lawyer. "So," she said, pen poised above a legal pad, "you and Michael have been together 15 years, own a house together, share some financial responsibilities, but never legally married. That's right, I said. We joked about it a lot, said papers didn't matter as long as we were committed. I gave a humorless huff of a laugh. Funny, right? Her gaze softened for a fraction of a second, then sharpened again. What you're dealing with is still a separation of assets, shared property, and potential claims. We can handle that. The important part is that from this point on, you don't communicate with him directly about anything substantial. Everything goes through me. Through you, I repeated, tasting the words. Okay. When I left her office, the sun was higher, too bright for how hollow I felt. My phone had more missed calls now, a string of texts lighting up the screen. Michael, unknown numbers, a couple from his sister, Emily. I stared at the notifications for a long moment, then opened my settings and blocked his number. If anyone needed to reach me, they could go through Ms. Herrera. I was done being the person everyone felt entitled to access whenever their conscience twitched. For now, I was staying at my friend Jade's apartment. She'd answered the phone on the first ring when I'd called the night before, her voice already loaded with concern. What happened? She'd asked. Can I tell you after I get there? I'd replied, my voice surprisingly steady. She hadn't pressed, just said, Doors open, come. Now, her tiny living room felt like a sanctuary, a mismatched couch, a coffee table scarred with old mug rings, a plant in the corner that desperately needed watering. I sank into the couch with a blanket around my shoulders and a mug of tea cooling in my hands. So, he brought her to your anniversary dinner, Jade said slowly, after I'd finally told her everything. Your 15-year anniversary, as a surprise. Apparently he thought I'd be adult enough to handle it, I said. Maybe even open to some modern arrangement. The words tasted like ash. Jade's eyes flashed. Modern arrangement, my ass. That's not honesty, that's humiliation. I leaned my head back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. The shock was still there under my ribs, but it sat under something else now, something colder, cleaner. I thought I'd cry, I admitted. I thought I'd scream or throw a glass or something, but it was just quiet, like somebody flipped a switch. Sometimes, Jade said softly, when someone shows you exactly who they are, there's nothing left to argue with. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table, face down. We both looked at it, then at each other. You gonna check it? She asked. Not yet, I said. I wasn't ready to read his explanations, his justifications, his attempts to reframe what happened at that table as anything other than what it was. A calculated ambush where I was supposed to play the understanding, gracious ex. But as the notifications kept coming, lighting up the dark screen with relentless insistence, a single thought settled in the back of my mind, cold and certain. This was just the beginning. Whatever story Michael and Alyssa were telling themselves about what happened last night, they weren't going to stop at one surprise dinner. And I was done being the one caught off guard. For the first 48 hours after the anniversary ambush, my phone became a battlefield. Every time I set it down, it lit up again. Buzz, 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 like it was trying to crawl off the table to get away from the onslaught. At first, it was Michael. Long paragraphs, short bursts, voice notes I refused to open. Then Alyssa chimed in from an unknown number, her tone syrupy sweet on the surface, acidic underneath. And then, because chaos apparently likes to travel in packs, Emily, his sister, decided she needed to get involved too. Jade walked past me as my phone buzzed for the 20th time that morning and raised an eyebrow. You gonna let that thing suffer, she said, or put it out of its misery? I flipped the phone over so I wouldn't see the notifications strobing across the screen. Ms. Herrera said not to engage, so I'm not engaging. Jade sat down beside me, cross-legged, sipping her iced coffee. Good, because men like Michael, they thrive on trying to rewrite the story while you're still in shock. Rewrite the story. That was exactly what he was doing. I finally opened my email, where he'd apparently decided to move the conversation after being blocked. His messages spilled down the screen like a vat of excuses had tipped over. Natalie, you overreacted. I thought you'd be more mature about this. If you hadn't walked out, we could have talked through everything. I wasn't cheating. Alyssa and I developed feelings slowly and organically. I wanted transparency. You embarrassed me last night. Transparency. He used the word transparency, like I hadn't been blindsided in a room full of strangers while he held another woman's hand. I exhaled sharply, the kind of exhale that feels like it's trying to pull your ribs inward. Beneath the anger, beneath the humiliation, something steadier was forming, something that felt dangerously close to resolve. The next email wasn't from him, it was from Emily. Natalie, I really think you should calm down and stop making this bigger than it is. Michael has been under a lot of pressure. Alyssa is very sensitive, and last night was upsetting for her. You shouldn't have walked out like that. It made things awkward for everyone. Awkward for everyone. I stared at the phrase until Jade leaned over my shoulder. Oh, she whispered. She's one of those people. Yep, I said. She thinks I wronged Alyssa. Alyssa, Jade repeated slowly. The woman your boyfriend introduced at your anniversary dinner as his new partner. That Alyssa. That would be the one. Jade took my phone, typed something, then handed it back. She had searched how to build a medieval catapult. Just weighing my options, she said, sipping her coffee. My laugh came out cracked but real. By the time I met with Ms. Herrera again 2 days later, my inbox looked like a crime scene. She scrolled through the messages with a practiced calm, nodding occasionally, eyes narrowing, only when she reached Emily's condescending commentary. They're trying to control the narrative, she said. Classic pressure tactic. They want you to feel guilty, confused, or responsible. Don't respond, at all. I wasn't planning to, I said. Ms. Herrera folded her hands. Good. Now, about the house. The house. The one Michael and I bought together 9 years ago. The one with the chipped doorway from when we moved in furniture. The dent in the hallway where Michael once tripped carrying groceries. The backyard we never quite landscaped the way we intended. What does he want? I asked. She slid a document across the table. Everything. I blinked. Everything? He wants full ownership of the house, Ms. Herrera said, voice level. He also wants monthly financial support, claiming he sacrificed his career potential for the relationship. I stared at her, speechless. It felt like the floor tilted under my chair. He worked full-time, I said slowly. I supported his career. I transferred money to him during his months between jobs. And he's the one who... I know, Ms. Herrera said. We have documentation. But his lawyer is arguing emotional distress and financial vulnerability. Emotional distress? I repeated. Because I didn't applaud his girlfriend at dinner? And the heirloom, she continued, tapping the next page. My stomach dropped. Not my grandmother's? The antique jewelry box. Hand-carved, gold-flecked, lined in velvet. It had been in my family for 4 generations and was specifically willed to me. He's claiming it was gifted to the relationship, she said. I closed my eyes. Of course he is. Ms. Herrera's tone sharpened the way a blade glints under light. We will fight it. I nodded once slowly. What else? She tapped another paper. A source from your mutual friend circle has informed me that Michael's financial situation isn't what he's portraying. He has significant debt and a history of failed business ventures. I let out a bitter laugh. So Alyssa didn't just steal my boyfriend. She inherited a financial black hole. Possibly, Ms. Herrera said, and possibly willingly. A prickling sensation crawled down the back of my spine. The déjà vu feeling I'd had at the restaurant. The way Alyssa walked in like she'd been rehearsing, like she already knew the script, suddenly made sense. Do you think, I said slowly, this whole thing was planned? Ms. Herrera said. I think it wasn't spontaneous, if that's what you're asking. The room felt colder. That night, back at Jade's apartment, I sank onto the couch and scrolled through a new batch of emails. Alyssa's latest message was a masterpiece of manipulation. Natalie, I know this is hard for you, but Michael and I didn't choose when we fell in love. Please be an adult about the house situation. We've built such a strong emotional connection in the past few months. Months, plural. They hadn't admitted the timeline before, but she'd just revealed it. 3 months at least. Michael had been lying long before the dinner. I lowered my phone, my hands cold. Jade, I said quietly, they're not going to stop. They're going to escalate. She handed me a blanket, her voice steady. Then escalate with Ms. Herrera at your back, not alone. I nodded. The shock was gone now. The humiliation had settled into something sharper, a cold, steady fire. Whatever story they thought they were building, whatever version of events they were trying to force on me, they had no idea what was coming next. The mediation room was colder than I expected. Not temperature-wise, emotionally. A wide table, neutral carpet, bland art on the walls. The kind of space designed to keep everyone calm, but somehow succeeding only in highlighting the tension coiling in the air. Ms. Herrera sat to my right, her posture perfect, her folder of documents neatly arranged like weapons ready for deployment. I mirrored her posture as best I could, though my stomach twisted every few minutes. Across the table, Michael sat beside Alyssa, who was dressed like she was attending a daytime talk show. Flawless hair, tasteful earrings, a pastel blouse that probably cost more than my monthly electricity bill. Emily perched beside her, arms crossed, eyes sharp, ready to pounce. And then there was their lawyer, a tall man with an expensive watch and an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else but was being paid too much to leave. Michael glanced at me once, then looked away. Alyssa offered a gentle, almost pitying smile that made my skin crawl. The mediator, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes and a firm voice, cleared her throat. Let's begin. Their lawyer went first. He painted a portrait so distorted it almost became entertainment. According to him, Michael had been trapped in a long-term relationship where his emotional needs were neglected. I was controlling, distant, and financially domineering. Michael was fragile, dependent, and deeply hurt by my abandonment. Alyssa, he said, came into the picture as an emotional support during a turbulent period. Alyssa sniffed dramatically. Emily rubbed her back like she was comforting a grieving widow. And regarding the house, the lawyer continued, Michael has established deep emotional ties to the property. It would cause significant distress for him to lose it. We believe full ownership is appropriate. Michael nodded solemnly, as though the house had personally raised him and taught him to read. And regarding financial support, the lawyer pressed on, Michael gave up promising career prospects to maintain the household, enabling Natalie's career growth. Compensation is both reasonable and necessary. I nearly choked. Lastly, he said, flipping a page, we contest the claim that the heirloom jewelry box is Natalie's individual property. It was displayed in the joint home and therefore became marital property. The lawyer finally closed the folder. My clients have acted in good faith and simply seek fairness. Good faith. Alyssa looked up at him like he'd just read her wedding vows. Michael avoided my eyes. For 2 solid minutes, I thought Ms. Herrera might wait politely. Let them finish basking in the glow of their invented narrative. She didn't. She clicked her pen, a sound so small it sliced through the room. Thank you, she said. Now let's address reality. She opened her folder. The shift was immediate. You could feel the air tighten, the way a room feels before a storm breaks. First, she said calmly, emotional distress. She slid a document forward. This is a sworn affidavit from the waiter who served at the anniversary dinner. He confirms that Michael introduced Alyssa as his new partner at the table and that Natalie reacted without causing a scene. Alyssa's face went pale. Emily stiffened. Second, Ms. Herrera continued, the timeline of this so-called emotional support. She placed another folder onto the table, then another. These are findings from the private investigator my client hired the morning after the dinner. They show that Michael and Alyssa were meeting regularly for at least 6 months. Photographs, reservation confirmations, and time-stamped entries. 6 months. Alyssa's polished veneer cracked. Michael's jaw tightened. Third, Ms. Herrera said, the accusation of financial control. She held up bank statements. This shows consistent financial support from Natalie to Michael, including transfers during his periods of unemployment and payments for various ventures. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. These, she added, lifting a printed stack, are emails where Michael explicitly stated his preference to maintain flexible work hours and rely on Natalie's stability. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Ms. Herrera didn't even glance at them. Fourth, the jewelry box. She pulled out a copy of my grandmother's will. This item is clearly listed as Natalie's individual inheritance. The mediator nodded, making a notation. Fifth, Ms. Herrera continued, voice crisp, the house. She tapped the final binder. While Michael claims emotional distress, the legal and financial records show that Natalie has contributed 70% of the mortgage payments and home maintenance costs. Michael swallowed hard. And finally, she said quietly, sliding the last document across the table, we have a matter of misappropriation. Alyssa stiffened. These, Ms. Herrera said, are credit card statements where Alyssa used Natalie's supplementary card, not for emergencies or agreed household expenses, but for hotel stays, upscale restaurant meals, boutique purchases, and men's luxury items. The lawyer blinked. Men's? Ms. Herrera nodded. Yes. All transactions coincide with dates and locations where Michael and Alyssa were documented together in the PI report. Alyssa looked like every drop of blood had drained from her face. Michael looked like someone had replaced his spine with wet noodles. Emily stared at the table as if wishing it would swallow her whole. And, Miss Herrera added almost gently, we also have records showing Michael's hidden debts and recent business failures. Information he omitted from his financial disclosures. The room went silent. Not the awkward silence from earlier. This one had weight, pressure, consequence. The mediator exhaled slowly. Given this information, I strongly recommend revisiting your proposed terms. Michael's lawyer leaned toward his clients, whispering urgently. Alyssa stared straight ahead, frozen. Emily's eyes darted between them, panic blooming across her face. They requested a recess. It lasted 25 minutes. When they returned, their entire tone had changed. They agreed to sell the house and split the equity 50-50. They dropped the spousal support claim. They conceded the heirloom, and the credit card expenses, over $5,000 worth, were assigned to Alyssa and Michael as marital debt, deducted from their share. Alyssa didn't speak. Michael barely lifted his eyes. Emily looked like she'd aged 10 years. When the session ended, Ms. Herrera stood, collected her documents, and said with a small nod, "Well done." I walked out of that room feeling lighter than I had in months. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, steady click, the sound of the truth locking into place. 6 months passed. 6 months since the mediation. 4 months since the settlement was finalized. 2 months since the house sold and the money was deposited, and exactly 0 days since I last thought about Michael with anything that resembled pain. My new apartment wasn't big. A 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet complex, sunlight pooling across hardwood floors in the mornings. The windows rattled when the wind blew too hard, and the pipes groaned in winter, but it was mine, all mine. Every inch of it belonged to no one but me. The first night I slept there, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, expecting the hollow ache of loss to creep in. Instead, I felt something else, something I hardly recognized at first. Peace. Actual peace. The kind that comes when the storm is over, not because it stopped being violent, but because you finally walked out of its path. According to the grapevine, the small, messy network of acquaintances who somehow always know everybody's business, Michael and Alyssa didn't last. They lasted approximately 3 weeks after the settlement. According to one mutual friend who swore she didn't want to get involved, but then proceeded to get very involved, the breakup wasn't dramatic, just predictable. Alyssa confronted the reality that Michael came with more debt than charm, fewer prospects than promises, and a whole lot less financial security than she'd assumed. She'd expected him to be a stepping stone. He turned out to be quicksand. She moved into a small rented studio. Her Instagram, always a curated gallery of yoga poses, pastel lattes, and inspirational quotes, turned quiet for a while. Then it returned, but dimmer, the posts edged with bitterness she tried to mask with platitudes. Michael, predictably, vanished from social media and resurfaced with vague posts about growth, healing, and moving on from toxic people. Jade sent me screenshots with the caption, "Toxic, eel woman who caught him lying? Bold strategy." As for Emily, she went radio silent. No more sanctimonious essays, no more passive-aggressive posts. Apparently, watching Alyssa and Michael get shredded by documented facts in that mediation room had taken the wind out of her sails. One acquaintance told me, "Honestly, Emily's been keeping her head down. I think she was embarrassed." Good. Embarrassment is cheaper than accountability, but sometimes it's the only currency people will accept. But all of that was background noise. Interesting to hear about, but no longer relevant to my life. My life had become mine again. Without realizing it, I'd filled my days with things I hadn't done in years. I picked up watercolor painting again, my kitchen table perpetually scattered with brushes and half-finished landscapes. I started going for evening walks, without checking the clock, without waiting for anyone, without planning dinner around someone else's unpredictable moods. I even joined a pottery class with Jade, who made a lopsided bowl on her first day and proudly called it abstract. One afternoon, I found an old box of photos while unpacking the last moving carton. At the bottom was a picture of me and Michael from our early years, young, smiling, hopeful. For a moment, the memory tugged at me. Not in a painful way, more like the ache of an old scar when the weather changes. I sat with the feeling, let it pass through me, then closed the box. That love had been real once, but the person I'd loved never existed in the way I thought he did. The love was real, the man was not. And somehow that realization didn't break me, it rebuilt me. I donated clothes I no longer wore, rearranged my living room 3 different times, discovered a tiny cafe 2 blocks away that made the best hot chocolate I'd ever tasted, and even started writing down little pieces of my story. Not for revenge, not for closure, just to remember who I'd been and who I was becoming. One evening, Jade and I sat on my balcony, wrapped in blankets, sipping wine. The city lights flickered below like scattered stars. She nudged my shoulder. So, what now? Rebound boyfriend? Wild dating phase? Tinder? Hinge? A mysterious stranger with a tragic past? I laughed. None of the above, not yet. Yet, she repeated with a grin. So there's hope. There's always hope, I said softly. Just not urgency. She clinked her glass against mine. To Natalie 2.0. To stability, I said. To independence. To finally deleting Michael's emails. We laughed again, and the sound felt easy. Not forced, not heavy. For the first time in years, my life didn't feel like something I was surviving. It felt like something I was living. And when I thought back to that anniversary dinner, the candlelight, the quiet music, the shock that should have shattered me, I realized something surprising. That night didn't break my heart. It freed it. The storm is gone. The debris has settled. The air is clear. And for the first time in a long time, so am I.